Streets of Rage, the fighting game that'll knock your socks off, with 40 individually controllable attack moves, and a neighborhood crawling with punks, muggers, and urban slime.
Hello, classic gamers. If you love the original Streets of Rage game, this one's for you. Taking a look at one of my favorite side-scrolling two-player cooperative fighting games ever today. And I only say one of because my favorite of all time is this game's sequel. But before we can get to the greatest, we need to talk about its prequel. It's the uppercutting and German suplexing history of Streets of Rage for the Sega Genesis. In the 80s, arcades were all the rage on the streets. The streets of rage, you could say. But many of the most popular machines were either single player, or the ones that allowed for more than one player pitted the combatants against each other. Even a game like Rampage, where the players could join in on the mutual destruction of a city, encouraged more competition than cooperation. Yuck. Everything changed in 1987 with the release of Double Dragon, allowing gamers to control Billy and Jimmy Lee as they battled street thugs in Union to rescue Billy's girlfriend Marion. Instead of having to wait your turn, Double Dragon allowed both brawlers to play on the screen simultaneously. 2 years later, Capcom upped the ante with their arcade game Final Fight, which featured the same idea of multiple players simultaneously fighting against endless waves of thugs, goons, and ruffians, but with an even greater moveset and better graphics. Final Fight seemed like the final word in multiplayer cooperative fighting games, until it got grand uppered out of its boots in 1991 by Sega. That year, Sega released Streets of Rage for the Sega Genesis, also known as Bare Knuckle in Japan for the Mega Drive. Best of all, for me at least, it didn't cost endless quarters at the arcade. You could play it as much as you wanted from the comfort of your own home. Back then, there were no trailers to hype you up. You just saw some interesting box art at the store, flipped the box around and saw some interesting graphics on the back, and decided to buy the game on the spot, unseen and unplayed. Or if you were lucky, it was available to rent at Blockbuster, Jumbo Video, or the local privately owned video rental business, like Steve's TV beside Frederick Mall in Kitchener, Ontario. The console wars were alive and well in 1991, and the choice between a Sega Genesis and a Super Nintendo Entertainment System was a tough one. For most people, there simply wasn't enough money to buy both, and after a lot of contemplation, I decided to go with a Sega Genesis as my first 16-bit console. From the commercials and the pictures in Electronic Gaming Monthly, the Genesis seemed like the more punk rock of the two new 16-bit systems. While I longingly watched on as lucky Super Nintendo owners got to play a home version of Final Fight from their couch, I thought I had to settle for this new two-player knockoff called Streets of Rage. As not just years but decades go by, we start to lose a lot of those precious little details that made our youth so special. But some of the truly powerful moments thankfully endure. And I still recall fairly clearly my first time playing Streets of Rage in 1991, grabbing a thug, vaulting over and behind him, delivering a thunderous German suplex that would have made Kenta Kobashi wince, all while the incredible rocking soundtrack blared. Looking over at my fellow street warrior with wide-eyed astonishment and thinking, what in the blue hell is this? The game had changed. Literally. This wasn't just fun. This was exhilarating. This was cool. This was... cover the ears of your kids if they're watching along with you. Badass. The gamble had paid off. The Sega Genesis was the punk rock system compared to the Nintendo's pop. And Streets of Rage's intense rockin' road war German suplex the Super Nintendo's Final Fight right into the dumpster. This was the first time I had ever played a game just to listen to the soundtrack. It wasn't just great game music, it was great music on its own, which is what I want to start with today because, to this day, it's still a soundtrack I put on in the gym to rage war against Father Time. And even though the gameplay in the sequel was better, The music in the first is still my favorite of the entire original trilogy of games, as well as the fourth, more modern installment. And that's the hill of rage I'll die on. The music was primarily produced by Japanese composer and sound programmer Yuzo Koshiro. In a 2014 interview with Nick Dwyer of Red Bull Music Academy, he said he decided to use club music because of its growing popularity in North America, even though it wasn't that popular in Japan at the time. It was his first time composing a project with the overseas market in mind, instead of his home Japanese market. He received no direction from Sega on the music. He did a demo and luckily the Sega Consumer Department manager liked it. His other works include the music for Dragon Slayer, Ys, Revenge of Shinobi, and ActRaiser. For Streets of Rage, Koshiro-san used house, techno, and funk styles for 8 stages of pulse pounding and punk pounding action. A trailblazer in the world of video game music, he sought out to recreate the beats of the Roland TR-808 and TR-909 drum machines, and the synths of the Roland TB-303 bass synthesizer, using a technique known as FM synthesis, short for frequency modulation synthesis. The result was what Electronic Gaming Monthly considered one of the best video game soundtracks they had ever heard, and called Koshiro-san just about universally acknowledged as the most gifted composer currently working in the video game field. And while I normally wouldn't focus so heavily on the music of a game in a game history video, I feel like the soundtrack to Streets of Rage 1 is half the magic of the game. So here's an in-depth breakdown of the tunes that accompany the rage. The title screen kicks off with a melancholy beat that set the stage for the rage. This wasn't just going to be fun, it was going to be heavy. Not just a blast cleaning up the crime-ridden streets, but a heavy responsibility. 38 seconds in, those piano notes kick in. And in musical form, it represents the true meaning of a warrior. This is going to hurt me more than it's going to hurt you. Violence is not a fun thrill, but a heavy responsibility, and a painful burden for the perpetrator to bear. Not enough of that melancholy reminder associated with violent games and movies today. It's not all downbeat though. The player select is a simple, upbeat, funky tune that got you ready for the fighting experience of a lifetime. Then, Stage 1, titled Fighting in the Street, the incredible dance beat that has a faint hint of a police siren sounding and fading off at the 11-second mark. The musical beats go beautifully with the body-pounding beats. It's a fluid dance of violence that John Woo would have been proud of. Stage 2, titled Dilapidated Town, is a nice breather. A laid-back and upbeat tune that sounds more appropriate for taking out the kitchen trash than taking out the street trash. The beach is normally a peaceful place to chill, but the Stage 3 music, Moon Beach, is a perfect blend of peaceful and punches, with an upbeat rhythm and synthetic wave crashes. What was so amazing about the Streets of Rage soundtrack was that it wasn't just short clips of music on repeat. It isn't until 2 minutes and 21 seconds into this track that my favorite part hits, a drum build-up into
Slap at the bass, mama! Slapping the bass, mama! Slap at that bass, mama!
Stage 4, titled Keep On Groovin', accompanies the bridge. Another semi-laid-back tune to help you enjoy the view while you throw street thugs into that view to their demise. Stage 5 is my favorite of the whole set, Beatnik on the Ship. The music for the battle on the boat is an intense and unstoppable freighter of fisticuffs, with the sound of a ship horn fading in and out, merging the music with the setting to create a more immersive experience. Stage 6, titled Stealthy Steps, is another laid-back funk beat with sirens blaring in the background that accompanies a stroll through a factory. How was this video game music in 1991? Are you starting to see how my brain couldn't comprehend how a 16-bit system could put out something that sounds like this? Nothing like this had ever been heard before in arcade, Atari, 8-bit, or 16-bit. Stage 7, titled Violent Breathing, is fast-paced elevator music. Literally, the express elevator to hell going up towards the final boss. And Stage 8, titled The Last Soul, is, to be honest, my least favorite track in the game. It once again has the melancholy of the title screen, but just seems to lack the power and intensity of so many tracks before it. Many of the tracks have a perfect synergy with the location they're set in, so maybe this was the intention. The players are exhausted by the time they reach this stage, and have everything thrown at them in this level. So that's what this tune sounds like. Exhausted. The bosses got their own theme at the end of each stage. Attack the Barbarian was a terrifying tune that made the bosses seem not only tough, but like something out of a horror movie. Nothing about this game cuts corners, so the final boss of the game didn't just use the same theme as all the other bosses. He got a supercharged remix of Attack the Barbarian called Big Boss to heighten the tension, anxiety, and drama. Quick little jingles for each stage clearing or game over. And 2 different tracks for the ending, depending on which choice you make. A downtrodden beat called You Became the Bad Guy, or a relaxing ballad called My Little Baby. Music wasn't the only sound that rocked in the game. It also featured some voice clips when the player attacked, or when the punks perished. Okay, on to the game itself. The story involves a once peaceful city that has fallen to the sinister gangster Mr. X and his endless legions of thugs, skanks, and mini-bosses. Mr. X's crime syndicate has grown so powerful that the government, as well as the police, have been bought off. Except for 3. Adam Hunter, Axel Stone, and Blaze Fielding refuse to join him and choose to beat him instead. So they resign from the police force and take to the streets of Rage as vigilantes to free the city from the clutches of the syndicate. So it's not just a fighting game. We're fighting for the fate of the city and maybe the whole world. Much higher stakes than a kidnapped loved one, which is usually the driving story in these fighting games. Similar to Final Fight, the 3 characters had different abilities and specialties. Adam had powerful attacks and the best jumping ability, but at the cost of being the slowest of the 3. Axel had high power for his attacks and moved quickly, but had the poorest range for his jumping attacks. And Blaze was the quickest of the 3, and had good range for jumping attacks, but had the least power. They also all possessed a unique moveset. Pressing the attack button for Adam delivered a jab, a straight punch for Axel, and a chop for Blaze. Pressing the attack button 4 times gave you a base combo. 2 jabs, a giant uppercut, and a kick that launched the opponent down the street for Adam. 2 head punches, a gut punch, and a finishing kick for Axel. And 2 chops, a kick to the gut, and a flipping back kick for Blaze. Each could jump using the jump button, and hitting the attack button while in midair delivered a jumping attack. Adam had a long-range snap kick, Blaze had a long-range spin kick, and Axel had a shorter-range knee. In addition to combo attacks while standing next to an opponent, they could be grappled, either by walking into them or by stunning them with a punch or jab and then walking into them. Once grappled, you could press the attack button repeatedly to deliver grappled strikes. For Adam, 2 knees and a bionic elbow, if you will, baby, to finish them off.
That's hard time! That's hard time!
For Axel, 2 knees and a skull-shattering headbutt that Harley Race would have been proud of.
Did not get up for some 2 minutes later. You witnessed it. Some 15,000 plus wrestling fans witnessed it.
And Blaze's grapple combo was 2 knees and a flipping kick. You could also launch the thug into his buddies behind you with either a shoulder throw from Adam and Axel or a monkey flip from Blaze. Pressing the jump button while in a grapple from in front let your fighter vault over your opponent and grapple them from behind. They could either be held so your partner could work them over, or pressing the attack button would deliver a spine-shattering German suplex. The carcass could fly into his buddies and cause damage to them, like the shoulder throw, which was handy for clearing the immediate area out when being swarmed by thugs. Another handy attack when being swarmed was the back attack, performed by pressing the attack and jump button simultaneously, or even easier, just hold one down while pressing the other. While the front strikes took 4 hits to knock an opponent down, this back attack knocked them to the ground with one powerful strike. Adam's was a jumping back kick, Axel's was a back fist that, if done repeatedly, kinda looked like he was dancing to the music. And Blaze had a standing back kick. Tandem moves were also available during 2-player games. Grabbing your partner and performing a shoulder throw or monkey flip launched them into the thugs, fastball special style. Or you could grab your partner from behind and vault over them, which would send you spinning and smashing into your opponents. If you grabbed your partner from behind and they pressed the jump button, they'd kick both feet up into an opponent. This also worked when being grabbed by the enemy from behind. If grabbed from behind by an enemy, in order to escape, you'd press the jump button to kick your feet up, and then press the attack button just as your feet made contact with the ground, which would perform a shoulder throw to free yourself from their grip. If you were thrown by an enemy, pressing up and the jump button simultaneously, just as you're about to hit the ground, allowed your fighter to land on their feet. Everything about this game was rhythm and timing. And there were even more ways to do damage. Weapons were hidden in objects that could be smashed throughout the game, like phone booths, crates, and steel drums. And the ultimate weapon was the special attack. 2 more cops who weren't bought off would roll up in their police cruisers and wipe out everything on the screen when things got hairy. The cops used either a rocket launcher or a machine gun to level the playing field again. This was a last-ditch attack though, and only 1 was given per stage, unless you were lucky enough to find an extra. The weapons were a beer bottle. The first strike smashed it over the opponent's head, and then subsequent strikes were stabs with the jagged glass into the opponent. There was a knife for short-range stabbing, or it could be thrown, a baseball bat, a lead pipe, and one of the most memorable weapons from the game, the infamous pepper shaker. It didn't hurt the enemy, just stun them with a sneezing fit. In addition to weapons, you could also find replenishing items. An apple would restore a bit of health, beef would restore the whole health bar, the 1-up icon would give you an extra life, a money bag awarded 1,000 points, and a gold bar awarded 5,000 points. 5 different types of street thugs made up Mr. X's gang. Galzia, or Garcia, is the red-headed whipping boy of the game. In addition to punches, he can use knives or bats. Signal was the one you couldn't get too close to. He could grab and throw you. He also had a sliding kick. Nora was a whip-wielding Jezebel who would beg off, Ric Flair style when hit, only to spring up and sneak attack you. Hakuyo was the kung fu master with a kick combo and jumping attacks. Probably a Young Bucks fan too. They like to have super kick parties. And Jack the Juggler, the part-time circus clown. He juggled torches or axes before throwing them at you. And 7 bosses in addition to the street fodder. Antonio was a giant with a boomerang at the end of the first level, City Street. Souther, another giant, was the boss of Stage 2, Inner City. He had a pair of gloved claws similar to the one Freddy Krueger wears, but with 3 claws on each hand like Wolverine. Don't try to jump attack him. The boss of Stage 3, Beachfront, was the ultimate warrior, or at least greatly inspired by the Warrior Man.
Ah, you can feel it, dude! You can feel it!
Abedidi, I think it's pronounced, was his name, and he had long hair, face paint, and a build like Warrior. To remove all doubt of who inspired the character, he also used a running clothesline and a gorilla press slam, just like the Ultimate Warrior. He never pinned Hulk Hogan clean in the Sky Dome in Toronto in front of 67,000 fans, though. Bongo was the boss of the Stage 4 bridge. You do not want to try to throw or suplex this big boy. He'll crush you under his weight. He only has one attack, but it's a deadly one. He runs across the screen breathing fire.
Pork chop sandwiches!
Stage 5's ship level ends with a pair of bosses, Mona and Lisa, or Onihime and Yasha in Bare Knuckle. Twin green recolors of Blaze, and they retain most of Blaze's offensive moves. Stage 6, the factory, throws a pair of Southers at you, and then the elevator Stage 7 has no boss. The final boss of Stage 8 is the sinister crime boss, Mr. X. After throwing every boss at you again in the longest level of the game, as well as making the special attack unavailable, you meet Mr. X, who's dressed to the nines and armed with a machine gun. He prefers to not get his hands dirty fighting. Instead of going immediately into a fight, he asks you if you want to become his right-hand man and join the syndicate. There are a few scenarios that can play out there, which added to the game's replayability. If you're playing a single-player game and say no, Mr. X starts shooting at you while deploying henchmen to fight you, making it tough to dodge bullets and get a hit in on him. If you're able to defeat him, you'll get the good ending, which shows stills of the trio of ex-cops reuniting with their heavy artillery backup and enjoying a relaxing sunset on the bridge to the tune of My Little Baby. If you say yes to joining him, you'll be dropped through a trap door back to Stage 6, and you'll have to fight all the way back to him again. If you're playing a two-player game and both players say no, the fight starts and you get the good ending if you beat him. If both players say yes, they both fall through the trapdoor back to Stage 6. But if one says yes and one says no, Mr. X pits you both against each other. Whoever wins the one-on-one will be asked the question again. And if the player who initially said yes this time says no, if you can defeat Mr. X, then you get the bad ending of the game, which features whichever character you were playing now sitting and chuckling in Mr. X's throne, with the text, "You became the boss, you are great," while "You became the bad guy" plays. If the game was too tough to beat on your own or even with help, there were some cheat codes that the game magazines shared to make the streets less raging. You could access extra continues by pressing left, BBB, CCC, start at the title screen. To increase your number of lives and skip to any level, at the main menu on Controller 2 you would hold down A, B, C, and right while selecting options on Controller 1. It was one of the best-selling Sega Genesis games and received great reviews upon release. Electronic Gaming Monthly gave it a 9 out of 10 and called it a winner in a category that was lacking on the 16-bit Sega Genesis, saying it was a real version of Double Dragon for the Genesis, as well as the best fighting game of all time, surpassing Final Fight. Megaplay also called it the best all-time fighting game. Megatech magazine called it the 6th best Mega Drive game of all time, and wrote, "Excellent sprites, backdrops, and brilliant music. Add in great gameplay and simultaneous two-player action and you've got an essential buy." The cover art for the game's box and cartridge featured no Adam and an incorrectly colored Axel and Blaze. In fact, Blaze isn't even wearing her skirt, and Axel is wearing Adam's yellow shirt. And they were fighting some guys who weren't even in the game. One of them has an Uzi, which isn't in the game either. This was during a time when the art department, or more likely, single art person, didn't have all the details on what the game was about, and so they did the best they could with the limited information they had to work with. The Japanese version, as usual though, got it right. The artwork for Bare Knuckles packaging and cartridge on the Mega Drive featured Axel, Adam, and Blaze in their game-accurate outfits, with a medley of them beating the tar out of some of the villains of the game. Is that Blaze doing a DDT?
The hold is fair. Cruel, but fair.
It's been available on a number of collections throughout the years. Got a stripped-down version for the Sega Master System, as well as the portable Sega Game Gear system. Spawned 2 sequels in the 90s and one in 2020. An amazing unofficial fan-made mod called Streets of Rage Remake. Comics, action figures, and remastered music, which Koshiro-san has performed live in concert. The crisp controls and Rockin' and Raven soundtrack are still fun to this day, and it's a great prologue to the main course of Streets of Rage 2, the true greatest two-player cooperative fighting game of all time. Thanks for checking out the History of Rage. Thank you to the Patreon tribe for supporting my work of rage. To show your support, visit patreon.com/michaelmercy to gain access to over 200 Patreon-exclusive videos, as well as ad-free early access to videos that go up on this channel. Thank you to the channel members for hitting the join button and showing your support as well. Remember to jab the like, and to join the tribe, punch subscribe. Good night, good luck, God bless, and Nerdmas stay.